love us.
Oprah was always about that. She's like, what I'm going to have on my show is always fantastic lighting. Okay, so I'm just waiting for a sign. Oh, it says that we are live. So here we go. Welcome everyone to episode.
Have we been live 15. That whole time?
No. We just got on
how this works.
Okay, here we go. Welcome everyone to episode 15 of America's Voices, 15. Where we bring Americans together from across the political spectrum to go underneath the headlines and have an honest, real, candid conversation again. It's not about who's right or wrong. It's about connecting to the human story with respect and with integrity. Today, we have a very special show. It just so happens to be on the eve of George Floyd's untimely death a year ago. We have a panel of amazing African Americans from across the political spectrum. And we are going to be able to ask, I'm going to be able to ask questions that many of you wanted to know some answers to, and make it a real and authentic experience and a chance for free thinkers and open-minded people, Americans everywhere, to kind of share some nuance that doesn't often get played in mainstream media. So here we go. I'm Daniella Bloom, America's relationship authority and dating expert. So let's have some fun. All right. So Joel, welcome back to the call.
Hey, how you doing, Daniella? I'm really glad to see you. This is going to be an interesting show tonight. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Joel Patrick. I'm a filmmaker. I'm gravitating back to that direction, video production, television production. It's my background. I'm in the process of casting for films right now, so really happy about that. My political leanings, I don't have a party. I voted Republican for the last 2 elections, but it's funny, you said something last night. You said something really interesting. You said, Joel, you're an independent. And I never thought about that before, because I always feel like independents are flaky, right? Whenever they talk about independents, I always get annoyed, right? Because they always talk about them like they're the undecided voters. Anyway, I'm very decided, but I don't have a party. But I've been voting Republican for the last 2 elections.
Amazing. We are always happy to have you. Taji, welcome back to the call, girlfriend.
Well, thanks for having me back. I'm Taji. I am a multi-hyphen entertainment professional, primarily a voiceover talent. And I'm a very decisive registered independent who's pretty loyal to my word. But like Joel, I don't subscribe to any party. I just subscribe to the truth. What's the truth, and does it make sense?
Amazing. Thank you. And I love how unapologetic you are with your views. We are going to go into some of them today.
Awesome.
Yes.
And Ivan S. Harris, our special guest today, please introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me, Danielle. I definitely appreciate that. My name is Ivan S. Harris, and I'm a photographer and actor and model and talent, social media personality. And so I do all these different things dealing with social media, right? And so my I don't have a political party either. That's actually interesting. We all have no political party here, so that should make for great information. I also do think of myself as an independent as well, and so I don't necessarily vote Republican or Democrat. It's just a lot of things that I feel like we can get into this show.
Amazing. It is fascinating. All of us we are independent. We are independent. And I know we have probably a wide perspective on some issues, but isn't it interesting how all of us really are independent, which means that we really care about what the candidates have to say, because we can go left or right, depending on what issues and candidates align with our values. So that is so cool that we are already on some sort of common ground here. Yay.
Well, you say we can go left or right, but left is so far to the left these days. Right. As a matter of fact, I'll just say this. I've always been a Democrat my entire life, didn't even look at the other side of the ticket.
Yeah.
I feel like I was just like I stood in the same place, but the ground shifted underneath my feet, and I just find myself here on the right. That's how it feels.
Yes. And
well, I think if everybody, like we're doing right now, if you sat down and you actually had the conversation, I think you would discover that everybody has very similar values, which is why I've never believed in the two-party system, because I just always thought, well, the two-party system just forces you to pick a side. But if you stop and just go, wait a minute, we all want the same thing. You might have a different way of getting there, but at the end of the day, we all have very similar values. I don't think two parties are even necessary.
I agree. And I say this almost in every single show, that the moderate voice is really the voice that is lost today. Most people tend to be level-headed human beings who have a lot of common sense to contribute. And it seems like the way our media and our nation has been going, it's forced us to choose sides and paint each other with one paintbrush. So let's get into some nuance. What I would like to know, since I have three amazing Black Americans here, what do each of you think are the biggest challenges you're facing today? I mean, I just want to bring up a fact that The Economist just came out with a poll today, and they said that only 11% of Americans think that relations between minorities and the police have improved, and that the crime has significantly risen in a lot of the blue states, including Minneapolis, Minnesota, and that the racial divide, the polarization, has actually gotten a lot worse in the last year. So with that said, who would like to open up the conversation?
Well, I will say that the racial divide is at an all-time high. And I had something interesting happen today, right?
Yeah.
So I put out a notice, and in my cast, I gave a list of the characters, and I gave a very brief description of what that character was like in 3-4 words, because I don't want to give away any of the script. I just want people to look at the characters and see, well, who do you identify with and who do you want to read for? One of the responses that I got back said, "Is this a white-only conservative production?"
Huh.
And I'm thinking, I went back and I read everything that I wrote, because I'm thinking, how did they that conclusion that this was an all-white conservative production? And then on top of that, they gave me a bunch of JPEGs with like Nazi symbols on them, right? Now, I didn't get the impression that this was, a conservative person or an extreme right person. I feel like it was some kind of a social justice activist that was writing to me. I mean, it could have been either way, but it was just such an odd thing to send for a casting notice. Like, who would care about that? And so that just illustrates this place that we're at right now. That it has to be about race. Everything is hypersensitive. And that, to me, that's the biggest issue that we're facing right now. One of the biggest issues.
Yeah, it's interesting how politics has to conflict casting calls, and it's not ridiculous about the acting. And I also I want to hear feedback from what you said, Joel, but also the idea today that only Black people can play Black characters, only disabled people can play disabled characters, only Native Americans. It just it seems to dilute the craft, and instead of judging people by merit and talent, we are forced to look at skin color and decide from there. So, Tajo,
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'll comment later.
Well, I would say on that note, if you're talking about a microcosm such as the entertainment industry for so long, it was always about merit and talent, but we were always the ones that were getting shafted in terms of, you take, for example, voiceover. Mm-hmm. For the longest time, I would only get African-American voiceover. Now, if you listen to the way that I'm speaking right now, I don't have we don't have a particular language or way of speaking, depending on what region that you were born and raised. Like if you're from the hood, you're like a Tiffany Haddish, then yeah, you're gonna have a certain colloquialism to how you speak. But there's this assumption that we all sound that way. So now it's weirdly gotten to this point where now, if there's a spec for a character that happens to be Asian, they're only going to see an Asian talent for that. They're not going to see that voice talent that can do multiple impressions of an Asian person, a Russian person, or an Eastern Europe. Like I can do an Eastern European accent, but nobody's going to cast me to voice an Eastern European character because I'm not Eastern European. But that used to be the beauty of voiceover, was that your talent was your merit. Mm-hmm. Now it's strictly skin color is your merit over your talent
and background.
Yeah.
So that's interesting that you all bring. I mean, you all have brought up so many different things. I want to go back to what Joel said real fast. You said that the divide is at an all-time high. I would say the divide has been the same forever, but people were able to stay in their own place, their own bubble, and not have to pay attention to what's going on over there. They can stay focused in their own life and their own, job or routine or whatever it is that they have going on. Specifically before the pandemic, it was just me. Hey, I got things to do. I have to go here. I got to go there. So I don't have either time or the awareness to hear or understand what's going on around, in the world around me outside of what I've got going on. And the reason I would say that is because if you take away the race issue, a lot of people are that way anyway. They only care about what they've got going on. So you can eliminate so many different things. If you're in the acting world or if you're in the entertainment world, then you only may focus on entertainment and whatnot. You may not focus on the finance world or what's going on in DC or what's going on in New York. And so when you say it's at an all-time high, I think that we've just been aware. It's been like a finger.
And let me clarify. I don't mean to interrupt. For context, I guess I should clarify that in my lifetime, this is just the most that I've seen, right? Because we had a civil war, we had Jim Crow. So I would say those were the all-time high. So I should correct myself and say in my lifetime. I'll let you finish.
Well, I mean, if you're correcting yourself, then that's fine. I just wanted to just talk on that real fast because, like I said, social media. I study social media. I work in social media. It's a tool, but it's also a microscope. So I look at it like this. If you think about from high school, you had a class clown, you had the smart person, you had all these different behaviors and personality types, right? But if you're not in that class, you're not going to know about Ivan's funny or Daniella is silly or Taji is smart. You're not going to know those things. But now we've been able to put microscopes on these behaviors. And so now you can see, I've never even known that this guy Ivan existed. But, oh, wow, he's pretty smart. Or, oh, wow, he's pretty funny. And by doing that, we start opening our lives, because that's, if you think about it, that's also what we're doing with social media. We're literally snapping every element of our life. I went to the store and bought some juice. Okay, so I go and put that on the social media. This other person doesn't even drink juice, but now they know about what it's like to go buy orange juice at the store. And so when I think about situations like, say, something as big as someone dying, and I won't go to George Floyd just yet. I'm just saying someone dying in a polarizing manner, right? Now I know what kind of things can happen outside of my bubble. And I think that's what the issue is the fact that people were able to stay in their own bubble, and now we've got this microscope on the world, right? So now we can see things that happen in like Egypt or wherever, and it's constantly being put in our face because that's where we're at. We're constantly on these phones, and it's constantly being put at us. Now, is it bigger than it was before? No, I was a class clown before. I was smart before, but now the behavior has shined. I mean, the microscope has been able to shine the light on my behavior, and so you that have never dealt with a class clown, or you know, somebody that's the valedictorian, you can see inside what's going on over there. And I think that's where we are right now, is that the veil has been opened over a lot of people's eyes. I can't tell you how many people say, oh man, I didn't even know that. And I'm like, in 2021, you didn't know that? Or whatever. It could be anything. It could be anything. I'm not even trying to go there just yet. You know, I know we want to, you know, graduate, you know, kind of.
Well, I just want to make sure that it's clear for myself and for everyone who's listening. So what you're saying is you don't feel that this year has contributed to more of a racial divide or polarization. You feel, and quite the opposite, that in fact, light was shined on areas that were not shown before.
I believe that, yes, I believe that people were dying, right? Police were killing people. And the thing is, I know, I'm gonna throw this out there right now and do the Eminem on you. Do you say more white people get killed or more of this? What I would say is we have an issue with police abuse of authority. I would say that first. I wouldn't even say just Black people getting beat up or this one. If we have we have a problem with police abuse of authority. Now, where it is that when it's a Black person, it is polarizing, because that's a historical thing that's been happening in our society since the beginning. And so I look at it like this. I'll break this down for you. Every day, if you do like this to somebody, right? You walk past them every day. Eventually, they're going to be expecting you to do that. Even if you're just joking around, you know, you just, hey, what's up, fool? You know, everything starts to seem like that person's going to do that. And so I will say some things are not what we may say they are because of trauma, because of historical trauma that has happened, that has been passed down, that has been witnessed and experienced. And so, you know, there may be people that are crying wolf. And then when you put a microscope on the behavior, then it looks like it's exaggerated. But that doesn't take away from the fact that the situations do happen. So to answer your question, Daniella, yes, people have been dying before, but there weren't cameras. There weren't, I guess you could say, evidence, right? The camera is the evidence to say that these people that have been talking about this for years were not lying. I think I think
what I meant was, you know, the George Floyd murder did start the Black Lives Matter movement, but where we are with, you know, it's interesting that race never came up during the trials.
Let me just correct you for a second, because people are going to go crazy.
Yeah, let's fix that.
It started
before then.
Yes,
I meant that where it took a national favor. Yes, I know Black Lives Matter has been around much longer.
I was just saying that because I know people will go crazy.
Yeah.
But I want to comment on that point real quick. Okay, so I agree with what you're saying, that social media and the internet has shined light on areas that people didn't know existed. However, the internet has been in existence for a long time, right? Now, social media really started to get some steam, I would say, right around 2009, 2010. I would say by the time we got to 2013, 2014, I mean, it had become a major part of our lives. Mm-hmm. And so it's been there for a while, but something different happened over the last year. And that was, you know, things have been so much more directed. Like, for instance, everything is not open and free anymore. Only certain opinions are allowed to be expressed. Only certain opinions are allowed to be expressed when something happens in the news, like a police shooting or whatever it is. The only narrative that we get nowadays is the narrative that the media wants to put out there. So I think what's causing the divide is we're not able to think about these things freely. We're directed to think a certain way. And the way that we're being directed to think is dividing everyone. I think that's one of the things that's different. The media has always been somewhat divisive, but not like it's been in the last year and a half to 2 years with all the big tech control, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, all of these places directing us to think a certain way. You can't even make a post about certain topics about COVID or wearing a mask or a vaccine. You can't even talk, your voice being shut down, or a disclaimer telling you how you're supposed to think about it.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's the difference. And that's what's causing the divide. Because we've always been here, but this is accentuating it. So we have something different going on right now.
I just do not agree. I've been as a person that has, like, I think I would say I embraced social media very early, clearly before the mainstream. You were about right, 2009, 2013. That was kind of like, hey, what's this? Okay, awesome, social media. But I would say that it would be in the same capacity of radio when it first started versus radio when the mainstream hit it, right? So if you think about that, yes, you're going to get more ears hearing more tales, right? We used to get, well, not we, but people would gather around the radio and listen to the War of the Worlds. War of the Worlds. and the sky was falling, and it was just a radio program. But because that medium was so new or so, innovative at the time, right? I have no choice but to believe this has to be real. And so with this social media thing, I'm going to give you that. It's been growing. And so now in 2021, where technology and all these different things have finally advanced to the level of, I would say macro or mainstream, outside of, when it first started in 2004, whatever, 2002, whatever, I would say that those things were still happening. And so when it's easy to just blame personal behavior, bad behavior on social media. I won't go. Like I said, there's a hammer laying on the ground. Yes, I can pick that hammer up and build myself a house, or I can hit somebody in the face. It's a tool. To blame the tool, right? To blame the tool and say, oh, this is why, blah, blah, blah. This is why the house got built, or this is why a guy got hit. No, the person had an idea that said he or she wanted to build a house, or he or she wanted to hit somebody in the face. So I just can't give that rationale, because it's too easy. It's too easy to just say, oh, the world's chaos because of 1 year. No, this stuff's been going on. That's how was able to bubble, because
let me back up a little bit. So it's been building over time, but it's been accentuated over the last few years when they decided after the 2016 election that we have to clamp down on speech. We can't allow certain people to have their voice accentuated, and they started deplatforming. Going back to radio, if you remember, when I was a kid years ago with the radio, it was so much more open, right? You could literally call up the radio station, they would have block parties. You could say, I want to hear 4 songs from Rush, and they would play all 4 songs in a row, and the obscure songs that never get played, right? It wasn't just like the number 1 single. I could pick any song on an album and say, I want you to play this song, this song, this song, and this song. And then, right? Radio was so much more open and more free. Then all of a sudden it started to get, now it's clamped down. You only hear 1 single. Well, if an artist is popular, they got 2 or 3 singles, and those are the only songs that you ever hear, and they get played on a loop over and over again, right?
But why would you say it clamped down?
What's that?
Why would you say it clamped down as of? Are you saying it recently?
Because right now.
Well, let me chime in here. I would say to both of your points, because something you said, Ivan, was really interesting. When social media kicked in, what happened was, and this actually all started with Trayvon Martin. We all know what has happened outside of social media, but what social media did was they took the opportunity to cherry pick and select a certain narrative in order to advance a certain agenda. Like, we all know that there's bad cops. But what's happened is, and I think to Joel's point, is that they have taken a select group and has said, this is only what happens to these people. And they have they have put it on loop so many. You know how when somebody tells you something or you hear something long enough, you start to believe it. So for the last, 12, 13 years, we have all come to the belief, well, some of us, that cops are out to kill Black people. And that's all. But you don't hear about the Tony Tempas. Nope, nobody's talking about, I don't know if you all are aware of Tony Temple, right?
Ivan, do you know who he is?
Actually, I do not.
Okay, so YouTube or BitChute Tony Tempa. Tony Tempa was murdered the exact same way George Floyd was. But the difference is Tony Tempa was white.
I think I did see that. And he had his knee on his neck the same way.
There's about 3 videos of 3 different people who were all murdered the same way, only to find out that this is a method that cops are all trained to do. However, to your point and to Joe's point, we are being fed a message that says this is only happening to one demographic of people, and you need to believe this or else. So what's happening as far as I need some more coffee. As far as the divide, we are all being polarized to believe a certain way that is separating us, because they want us all to think that it's white versus Black, kind of like back in the 50s and 60s, where you had segregated water fountains and segregated lunch counters, and it's almost like we're coming to that place where history is repeating itself in a different form and fashion. And I'm sitting here going, if we're not careful, this is going to be really bad. This is going to end bad. So
I would say to that, and I'll say to that, I don't just subscribe to black and white. Anytime I try to talk about things, I'm subscribing to either Black versus racist or Asian versus racist or whoever I'm speaking of. I really try to be more in tune to sexism and all kinds of different things, even things that I'm not necessarily affected by, because I know what it feels like to be affected by something. And so I try to be more open and to listen and understand, because it's the same type of microaggressions, it's the same type of things that you're like, oh man, can I really prove that? I'm not sure. You know what I mean? But in the grand scheme of things, I would say, like I said in the beginning, there's a problem overall. But for some reason, you're right. We get up in arms, the polarization, the media, whatever, will only focus on that one thing. Now, here's what I will say. That one thing is a problem. It is. We can't dismiss the fact that this situation happened. But what we need to do is also take a look at the other situations and say, okay, we've got a whole bunch of situations happening that are all affecting us as humans. Obviously, there are some overzealous cops that are doing certain things. Right. That's how you were able to stay on the force for like 20 years and have 16 citations or whatever it is, and still be able to continue doing your job. Think about if, okay, Joel's an actor or he's a producer. If he has a person, an actor or someone on his set coming into work messing up every day, how many chances is he going to keep giving the person to keep making those mistakes? But what we have that situation where it's saved or swept under the rug or pushed to the side. And so this person is able to do that again. I guarantee if you were to look at the situations, that person isn't just, like you said, Taji, he's not or she's not just going after Blacks. They may have this over-aggression towards humans. And so if anyone comes into their authority, then it's a problem. And they will showcase their authority by using excessive force. And I'll be the first one to say, I'm not just saying it's just Black versus white or Black versus cops. I'm saying we have an overall problem with police abuse of authority and the fact that the system doesn't necessarily check them in the same way. They just have too much power. And for me, I think that that's what we need to really look into. And the reason I say that is because when you look at these situations, a lot of times they'll say it was justified or it was, it was clean. or they'll figure out some type of way to make this situation be, oh, it was legit. And the easiest way to do it is to say, oh yeah, he moved, or he jumped, or she made some move that made me feel threatened. So now I can go in and finish what I need to do, which is neutralize the situation, which is how I get back home. So to me, when I think of those situations, I'm like, there's too much leeway with that, because if I sneeze, even as
a cop, too much leeway with the cop.
So can I?
Too much. They have too much leeway as to say, oh, I was threatened, and so now I can go and use physical force because I felt threatened with my life. And that doesn't have to be just Black. It could be anything.
Well, to what you were saying is that I don't think that's necessarily a problem with, in terms of this, with the system necessarily. I think it's a problem with how we're told and sold what to believe. Because you take, for example, perfect example, Jussie Smollett. When that whole thing happened, everybody lost their mind. I mean, all you had to do was go on the internet and everybody thought, this is it. They coming for us. Look what they did.
Actually, for our listeners, can you just summarize what happened with Jussie?
Oh, I just figure everybody knows what happened with Jussie Smollett. The actor from Empire who made the claim that there were members of KKK that attacked him in the middle of the night with a noose and said that they were going to hang him, et cetera, only to we all find out later that that was a big giant hoax. But everybody lost their mind about it and thought, oh my gosh, this is really happening in, 2019 America. They're coming for Blacks with nooses. So all that to say is that I personally think that the mainstream media is the problem, because you cannot identify a specific law in our system that is purposely discriminating against Black people. Because if that's the case, you have to say, well, how did we get a Black man elected to control that system for 8 years? And we still have this problem, which started at the beginning of his term. So all that to say, I think it's the media. I think it's the media that perpetuates this ideal on us that you need to fear the cops. You need Black people, you're victims, and you should be afraid. So that's what I think it's the media.
And as someone who, I am not white. I'm Jewish and Middle Eastern. But from my perspective, seeing what started as the George Floyd issue shining light on police brutality, which we as Americans can all agree needs to be better reformed. But then it went to the rioting, then it went to knocking down statues, then it went to critical race theory, canceling Aunt Jemima, having safe spaces, separate graduations. It just kept going to where we are now.
Well, I think if you have an extreme one way, right, let's think about how extreme it was on one side for, again, the 400 years or whatever. It was extreme, right? We can all agree it was extreme. So in order to try to fix that or rectify the situation, sometimes it will seem like, or it may even.
Can you define what extreme means? Can you define what extreme means?
Well, if you have, so if a person is walking down the street and you have to literally get off the sidewalk while they walk past you, I would say that's pretty extreme of racial hate or some sort of barrier that says, hey, listen, you don't belong here. That goes on.
One second. I just want to make sure we're on the same page. Taji and Joel, do you agree with that?
He's talking about going back to the 60s and the 50s.
Is that what you're talking about, or are you talking more presently?
But even before then, if you just look at the extreme.
Oh yeah, 60s, 50s, 60s. I mean, that's when it ended, is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Okay, so what's that? 45, 50? What's that? 60 years? I'm not good with math. What is that? 60 years?
Yeah.
So 60 years.
60 years. Yeah.
What is it?
Well, it's about 60. It's fine. 6 decades.
It's a few decades. So
yeah, it's about 6
fallout
decades.
is not the fallout doesn't just go away. I mean, like literally, that was my mom we're talking about that had to deal with that. That was my grandmother we're talking about that had to deal with. It's not like 60 million generations later on. It's literally people I can go call and be like, hey, I was 19, da 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 da, and they can tell me these things. So the fallout isn't just it's like some people think that they just make. But Lyndon B. Johnson signed that act, and there was just a magic wand, and now all of a sudden everything's great. And so that's not it, because we still have microaggressions, microcosms, subcultures, and all these different situations. I was just watching a Red Table Talk today, and they were talking about microaggressions within the Black and Asian community, and that stems back from years and years and years ago. And so when we try to just put this whole like magic wand that everything is just great, like I just don't subscribe to that, because I know in the daily, right? The daily, some things happen. Now, are they as big as maybe the media makes? Again, they were putting a microscope on it, and then more people get, to seeing these different viewpoints and things, and the perspective grows, and so that's where we are. But to just, I don't subscribe to just wiping it away like it doesn't happen at all. Now, to Taji's point, got it. Taji's point.
I was like, just don't say Taraji. I'm not Taraji.
No. I said Taji because I was reading it.
I was like Tajiji. That's a new one.
Yeah, that's my bad. To your point, I was saying it based on the fact that we've had extremes. So it's either all the cops are killing Black people, or it's not not one Black person is getting killed by the cops, right? And so I don't subscribe to either one of those. I definitely think there's an issue, and again, like I said, the issue stems with just police abuse of authority anyway. So when you have an overzealous cop that has implicit bias, that means things can happen, things can escalate more than they would if you think that the person is not as evil or aggressive as the next person. And so for me, I just don't want people to think that it's all or nothing. It's not all or nothing. And I go back to the whole cop thing with as far as like, I just think we give the police as an organization, we give them too much power or credit. If you think about it like this,
what's the solution?
What's the solution?
Yeah. I mean, listen, I'm with you, right? So I'm all about solutions. So what's the solution to this?
So to me, I think the solution is to actually hold the cops accountable. Now, is every single crooked cop, I shouldn't say that, that's my bad. Every cop that is crooked, are they, they should be held accountable. They should be taken to, court and had a trial, just like if all four of us did something, we get our day in court, right? But a lot of times it's like, oh, we'll just throw that away. I look at the Ahmaud Arbery situation where they were at home with their feet up, and because a video came out, then it's like, oh shoot, let's go back and look at that. I'm willing to bet that happens more times than not, that where people are like, man, just here, this da 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 da, boom boom boom, and keep it moving. Every day we read about somebody being exonerated on some DNA evidence from 1972 that the guy didn't do it, he didn't kill the person, or he didn't do this or do that. And so I would say we definitely need an overhaul on our criminal system, on our police system, and just educating more people about implicit bias, your immediate reaction to seeing someone lighter or darker, and how you act towards that.
Okay, so just okay, a good friend of mine that's in the LAPD, African American, and he's, every time I go to his house, he's doing some type of training. Am I still there? My picture disappeared. He's doing some type of training.
You're a little pixelated, but you're still there.
Oh, really? Let me see if I can get back. Sorry about that. I just lost the Zoom.
We can still hear you. It's just your photo that's up. We can hear you.
The photo, Mr. Cool, right there.
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you.
So, okay, I was going to say, I have a good friend of mine, LAPD, African American. He's always complaining about all the different training that he has to do on his free time about the very thing that you're talking about, implicit bias. So yeah, they are doing things about that. And I think that is important to do. I'll make sure I get the video up, I promise.
Yeah, picture video.
Yeah.
Well, we
But
can hear
yeah,
you,
they are doing things, but I like to focus on solution, because we all know there's a problem, and I'm just all about trying to figure out what do we do about that.
We don't though. That's what I'm having an issue with. Over the last year, I had people that specifically said there is not one problem, whether it's police abuse of authority for everyone or blacks or whoever. They would say to me, "You're lying. You're making these things up."
But making it up in what context though? Because I mean, that's kind of to say there's not a problem in what context though, as far as like what the I'm not clear because I keep hearing and you can probably define this. I hear about microaggression and implicit bias, but I'm not clear as to in what context everybody's talking about microaggressions and implicit bias.
Every context. It's literally throughout embedded in this entire country for every situation you can think of, whether it's hospitalization, whether it's
part of the human condition.
What's that?
Hey, hold on, Joe.
It's part of the human condition.
Right.
It exists everywhere.
But this is why
it's what we do by nature. It's part of the human condition. We make judgments and we make assumptions when we think about things. We've experienced the world in a certain way, and so wherever you are, wherever you live in the world, you have implicit bias. It's just part of our condition. It's how we operate.
So
that doesn't mean it's always right, but it's part of the human condition.
I would say to that, then there comes you said the training, right? Your friends doing training. That's great. Yeah. I won't knock that. What I will say is elaboration on the training. What did I just learn, right? So when you go and make a judgment, I don't care if it's any of us, any four of us, when we make a judgment, oh shoot, oh, ooh. Immediately think about what made you come to that judgment or that conclusion. That's where it starts, because what happens is people make their judgment, they come to their conclusion, they do whatever they do, and they go about their day. They never analyze.
But why
did I clutch my purse? Why did I clench up? Why did I do?
Why is the assumption always racist though?
No, it's not. Joel just specifically said it's in all human endeavor of life, right? So right. When you make the judgments, you're literally saying, okay, I think this person is good, bad, aggressive, cool, whatever the case may be. So I would say we actually need to at least do some sort of awareness and acknowledgement of the implicit bias that makes you make that judgment, that makes you say, oh man, I think about, because I'm conscious and aware of it, I think about times that I may do something like that, right? So if I go in a store and I see certain people, I don't even want to say any names. If I see certain people, I may say, ooh, and I'm like, ooh, shoot, okay, hold on. Let me think about this. Why did I think about that? Oh, okay, so let me step back. Let me step out of my element. Out of all my friends, I'm the PR person. I'm like, hey, you can't say that. You can't say the R word, can't say the N word, based on derogatory speech. And I think about those things based on what it's like to be in everyday situations. We only think about these things because George Floyd is, caught on camera, or because Tamir Rice was a social media explosion. But these things that happen, they happen daily, but because they're not filmed or not talked about or not spoken about in other bubbles or other people's, their other, situations that they've got going on over there, then we don't pay attention to it. You know what I mean?
Well, and to that point, speaking of, we're talking about the implicit bias or the microaggressions. You never hear about what's happening in the inner cities with the number of Black men being killed by Black men.
But you do though.
But the thing is that it's not emphasized. It's not, you don't see people protesting. You don't see BLM out there, putting up signs or because Black Lives Matter, right? So we always hear about the gun violence that's going on in our Black and brown communities, our low income communities, but there's never a spotlight on it as there is when a cop kills a Black man. So my point is, in terms of the implicit bias and in terms of the microaggression, specifically towards police officers. I'm trying to understand how that applies when police officers have to be made aware of a situation. Like, they don't just drive around town and pick a Black person and say, okay, we're gonna go and take this person down. Somebody, like, you take, for example, the Jacob Blake situation. She had to call the cops on Jacob Blake, but they made it sound like the cops just came and found a Black man and targeted him and used, you know, the terminologies that you're using, when I'm like, wait a minute, but he sexually harassed his ex-girlfriend. She's the one that called the cops. So what are we talking about here in terms of this implicit bias against Black men? She had to, for her safety, she had to call the cops on him, so among many other situations.
So does that one situation, I'm always interested in this. Does one situation erase the entire situation, like everything?
No, but my point is not just one situation. If you think about the numerous situations that were constantly told and sold by the media, it's always after the fact where we find out the details of what actually happened. How did we get here? Because we always see the last 20 seconds of the situation, and then when the buildings are burned, when the fire is set off, then it's like, oh yeah, so you, for example, Freddie Gray, they burnt down the entire community after they heard all you heard about Freddie Gray was a bunch of white men assaulted and took down Freddie Gray. Well, after the smoke cleared, we find out there were 6 people involved and half of them were Black. And that's the point that I'm making in terms of the information that we're told to believe versus what it actually is, what a police officer's job actually is. And we're only sold a selective narrative that's supposed to, create a reaction out of us, especially Black people, in order to push a certain agenda or to advance a vote for somebody. If that makes sense.
And we can't ignore the fact that there is an agenda. There is an agenda.
And that's the problem I have.
Yeah, there is an agenda to defund the police, to dismantle the police. And so how do you do that? You have to constantly paint this perception of what's out there. Now, having said that, I'm not negating that police brutality is a problem, and that in the Black community, that it may be worse than it is in other places. Look, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, right? So I grew up with the frustration that every time I watched the news, I mean, there was literally a period of time in the early 90s, or in the 80s, early 90s, when Black on Black violence was the popular thing, right? So anytime I turned the news, it was Black crime. There was another incident involving the police where they arrested somebody. A cop strangles, a Black man dies in the arms of a police officer with a stranglehold, right? You would hear about these things all the time, and then it would go to court, and then the police would be completely exonerated. No consequences, nothing. And so I grew up with that frustration of seeing the fact that we never get justice at all. It's only been recently that it seems like the tide has turned. So I want to acknowledge that there is a problem. I'm not saying that there isn't a problem there, but I also have to acknowledge that there is an agenda to defund the police, to dismantle the police. Well, and the way that you get there is that you have to paint the perception in people's heads that, that there's something specific that is happening. Black men are being targeted. Black men are being hunted, which is, I think we're going too far with that.
Well, something you said earlier.
For everything, though. Everything has an agenda. Like all 4 of us have an agenda on this show. Like, we want to be on the show for whatever reasons that we have, that could be considered an agenda. So I don't necessarily want to just demonize having an agenda, or else we all on this earth should be demonized for having some sort of agenda. But there's a very specific agenda that's happening in regards to the police. And if you study, I'm just going to go a little bit, I'm going to take this a little bit further right now.
right now they're trying to implement socialism in this country. This is what they're trying to do, right? And if you go back and you study history and you look what they did with the police before they were able to implement it, they either defunded the police or military, got rid of them. Once they get rid of them, then they bring in the people that they want to replace them to help them carry out their agenda. I know that's going really far, and that may seem like it's off the topic of what we're talking about, but this is happening right now.
Well, there's a difference between having an agenda and having a purpose. I think we're all on here for the purposes of having the conversation, because there's not enough of this that's happening just across the board. We don't see conversations like this on the CNNs or your mainstream media. But I think to something you said earlier, Ivan, that I wanted to jump back on, you were talking about how what you do, or you know, for you using an example of nobody knew that you were the class clown. I think that's the frustration I have, is that we're constantly being polarized as Black people, that we are somehow disadvantaged. But like you just said, some people didn't know what you do. You're this multi-talented Black man, but yet we have this narrative that's being put out that, oh, you know, you can't achieve anything because you're at a disadvantage. And I'm like, okay, and I'm listening to what you just said, and I'm like, okay, but here you have a very successful Black man here that you were saying that a lot of people don't know that this is what you do, and that you're very successful, and you set out to achieve a goal. And my frustration is that we are being told the polar opposite. And I personally think that it's a setup to destroy us as a people. If we're talking about what does it mean to be Black in America today, I think we really, really need to wake up and open our eyes at the fact that we have a really big, how do I put it? We have a really big conglomerate that wants to set us up to destroy each other from within, with a narrative that's not necessarily factual.
Okay, so who would you say
is selective information that is being told to us to get a reaction out of us, to get a result that is not going to be beneficial for us as a people.
Who would you say is they?
The media, politicians.
Malcolm X said the most dangerous man in America is the white liberal, because they're implementing they pretend to be your friend while implementing policies that are destroying the community.
The community. So, like you were talking about LBJ. When you were talking about LBJ, it's carried over. Look at our communities. We used to be 23% of you had less. Okay, so now, right now, currently 70% of Black women are single. But prior to that, you only had 23% of single Black men and women, because you had fathers in the home, you had full nuclear Black families. Now you got 70% of Black women are single or single moms. That's a problem. And that just lays weight to what LBJ intended. Because remember, he said, I'm gonna have those N-words voting Democrat for the next, 200, 400 years? So, and look at where we are. And you go, because I grew up near the hood. I'm from Inglewood. So I go back to my communities and I see what is happening. And I say to myself, why aren't we progressing? Why are our communities getting worse? But we've got these people at the top that look like me that are saying it's white people, it's white supremacy. And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, the cells in my brain are going, hold on. We elected brown people to fix this. You guys are in control of this, and it's gotten worse. It's not better. So something's not clicking. 2 + 2 = 4. It's not 6. We're not dumb. So that's where my frustration is, because I feel like we're being fed a lie. and it's going to ultimately destroy us. That was a mouthful, but I had to get it out.
That's good.
Yes.
So I don't negate what you're saying. I that's why I don't represent my. That's why I don't consider myself I consider myself an independent. I don't consider myself a Republican or a Democrat, because to me, my personal opinion, neither one of those neither one of those parties have my, or what I would say the Black community's true best interest at heart. It's literally just, hey, let me get your vote.
Exactly.
I agree.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
I agree with you.
Democrats, I would look at both parties and say, let me get your vote and I'm out of here. And so where we as Black people, what we really need to do is come together and say, what is our agenda? Like, what exactly do we want to do? Now, here's where the problem with that is. Let's say it's 13% of the population or whatever. Like,
right.
I grew up in the same house with my sister. We can't decide what to drink for Friday night bingo night. You see what I'm saying? So, and both of us have the right to our opinion. Both of us are entitled to our thoughts. So who's gonna get the lemonade or the orange, the orange Fanta? You see what I'm saying? Like, both of us have precedent in this house. It's both of our house, you know what I mean? We both live here, but one of us is gonna have to break. One of us is gonna say, okay, you know what, here, you take the lemonade. Okay, cool, we'll have Fanta today. And so that's what's going on in our community. All of us have the right to want the better things in life. Now, what's the better thing? I might say I want a yacht. You may say you want a boat, right? They're both boats, but it's two different things, two different mindsets, two different, what can I afford? I can only afford the speedboat. Okay, because I can afford the yacht. You know what I mean? And so we're being put on the spot to say, hey, make a choice. And that's not necessarily fair either, because we all should have the right to be able to say, you know what? I like what, I'm gonna say keywords. I know they're triggers. I like some of the things that Trump said. I like some of the things that Biden said, right? But instead, because those names aren't looking out for Joel specifically, right? It's like, you said Trump, you said Biden. Oh my God. So, you know what I mean? And so that's where we're at, is we all do have the right to feel, and this is America. We do have the right to say, I want this and this and this, and I don't want that and that and that. And so, Joel, you may say you want the exact opposite of what I want. I go back to the Fanta and the lemonade. Now, at the end of the day, when we vote, who's the person that is going to be, standing on top of the mountain, the champion, and who's the person that's like, oh, shucks, like, oh man, it didn't work out for me. That policy that I wanted, I didn't get.
But but that's the point where I think we're all on the same page here, is that, and to Joel's point is that, like what you just said, you might want the Fanta, Joe might want the lemonade. Joe's going to vote for the person who's going to give him the lemonade that he wants. But what we're being told is that if you don't vote for the person that's giving the Fanta, there's going to be consequences, or you're going to be demonized or castrated on social media because, for example, if you're Black and you support 45, then all hell is going to break loose on you. And I would say for a lot of my friends who were all staunch Obama supporters, I can tell you there was a staunch difference in terms of policy, or based on policy and merit. The person that wanted the Fanta and the person that wanted the lemonade, you realize, wait a minute, we both want both of it. And this particular candidate is able to balance it out and give us both of it. But you can't vote for that person because that person is only supposed to be selling you Fanta, right? So what we have here, and again, I go back to saying it's the narrative that is being sold to us to divide us.
Okay, so I want to get on that real fast. Okay, so you go back to, so let's say Trump is the phantom, right? I think that the problem or the issue with people saying I want to get this Fanta is certain things that he has said or done or came across in a polarizing manner that says that's not what I want. I actually don't want that. But he does have the drink that I want. So now I'm already at a disadvantage because this guy is saying certain things that either philosophically or ideologically or however the case may be, I just don't gravitate towards this person's character. But he may be giving me the Fanta. So now do I sell my entire soul because I want the Fanta?
But you're not selling your soul.
That's what I think. Yeah.
No. Don't take it for Trump. Take it for the person is not necessarily what I want, but they may have this water that I need. I want this water, but the person is like, you know what? If you come get this water, then you got to take your headband off. I'm just using these as examples to where it's like a polarizing situation.
Yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying, and I think where we agree and disagree is that based on the way that our laws are laid out in terms of, for example, what qualifies you to run for a particular office. Yeah, Trump, he doesn't have the best oratory skills or candor. However, if you are a person of your word and you say, I'm going to give you that water, you might not like how I say it. If it's going to benefit me in terms of how I live my life, the money I make, if I want to grow a business and you have a policy that you put in place that is going to allow me to grow my business in a financially prosperous way, I don't care what your oratory skills are, what your character is. I'm going to say, all right, he spelled it out. He laid out the bill. This is the opportunity that I have as a Black woman to go build my business, and I get this incentive. Wait, you're offering that? I don't care if you're purple and you talking gibberish and it doesn't make sense to me and I don't like it. What matters is, at the end of the day, across the board, presidents, politicians, how are you going to deliver on the people? How are you, especially in our communities, how are you going to deliver where we have the ability to prosper and be successful? Because right now, like I said, I go back to my hood, we're not prospering at all. It's worse than it's ever been.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to go around quickly just to get a gauge of where everyone's at. Can you guys each say the top 3 areas that you think are the most challenging for African Americans today? Taji, you're going to say the mainstream media divide. Ivan, you're going to say police brutality is one of your top ones. What other ones come to the forefront of your mind with the challenges that you would like to see the African community be able to overcome or improve upon?
I wouldn't say that's an issue. I wouldn't say that's the number one issue that's plaguing Black people. I wouldn't say that.
So, okay, I'm curious what you would say.
Okay, so first of all, unity. I would say that we as Black people need unity. But again, I go back to how do you get unity from people that have the right to feel and believe? Like, for instance, Taji said, she would go ahead and vote for the guy that isn't necessarily on the same moral fiber or moral character because he's giving these policies. Myself, as a person that prides myself in trying to at least be empathetic to other people, if I'm just going around talking and offending people, that to me does not sit well with my character or my moral fiber. And so I can't just give you my vote because you said you got the water for me. Because if you got the water for me and I'm just literally like your pigeon to just go get this water, then I don't have any principles myself. And so that's one of the problems that we have, is the fact that you are entitled to your opinion. You should vote for the person that's going to bring you the Fanta. That's what you want. I'm entitled to my opinion. I want a person that doesn't showcase that he seems, or she, whoever, that they don't have some sort of fortitude towards human nature and human people and empathy towards all humans, and not necessarily ostracizing those people.
I think we're getting off
topic.
topic.
I gotta stop you right there. Hold on, I gotta stop you.
Okay.
Because, regardless of whoever you voted for, let's just take the last two candidates. You can't look at one or the other and say that one is morally superior to the other.
Did I say that?
Listen, you can't say that one
said that Biden or whoever was that. I didn't say that. I never said that I was going to go over here with this guy. See, that's what people get messed up with me particularly. Because they think that if I don't choose Trump, I'm automatically rooting for the other guy.
That's not what he's saying.
Hold on. This is why I did not name a name, because I don't know who you voted. I'm just saying that you can't look at one or the other and say that one is morally more right on than the other. Okay, that's my point.
And I like that. Let me interject with that. You're absolutely right. I'm not saying one person. We won't say names. I like that, Joe. I'm not saying one person has more moral fiber or more, a better character than the other. What I'm saying is, this person that's in my face right now, I don't rock with you. Okay, so I'll deal with this person over here in a second. We can go to the Democrats. I know you all are on the right.
No, but let's not make it about what the candidate is doing for your community, because again, that's external. Let's talk about the Black community right now, regardless of who's in office. Now.
I think go ahead, Joe.
But I mean, to me, I think all issues in the Black community center around the family, because once you can fracture the family, which is the backbone of the community, then you want, right? The government can raise your children. Women can be married to the government. And fathers can be absent from the home. So in my opinion, the number one problem in the Black community is the family. When I look at the Jewish community, when I look at the Armenian community, the one thing that is the fact they are so family oriented. This is why Jewish people are so together.
And why they're to add to that, it's why let's be real, they are wealthy because they have a lot of their values are intact with family. I remember just really quick, I was at the 99-cent store, and the 99 cent is no longer 99 cents. So I see this family, this Jewish family, Orthodox Jewish family, and the son picks up a bottle of juice, but the juice is $1.99. The dad says, "Oh, that's too expensive. Put that back." And I turned my head and I went, "Wait, this is a 99 cent. That's too expensive." I said, "But you know what? That makes sense. Why they sustain a certain level of wealth, where it's like, well, that's a whole nother topic. But all that to say is that to piggyback on what Joel was saying and what you were saying, Ivan, is that we have to look at what is happening in terms of the Black community. It doesn't matter who's president. Well, it kind of does. It kind of matters who our politicians are, because they're the ones that are making the policies that affect our communities. So this is why, to what you were saying, I can't vote based on feelings or based on how someone makes me feel. And it doesn't negate what my moral compass is. What it factors is that, how is this person, and again, I go back to my community, I'm not going to name names, but the same people that are in control of my hood have not done anything to progress our communities. Okay. And these are okay. Thank you, Joel. But these are the people, and I grew up in these communities. We voted for these people, and I always used to ask my mother, why do we always have to leave our community to go get quality dining, quality retail, anything of good quality, if these are the people that are supposed to be progressing us and helping us to advance, but yet everything is the lowest, poorest quality in our communities. So to what you were saying, I'm going to vote for that person. I don't care what comes out of their mouth because everybody's flawed. There is not one perfect politician. There's not one perfect president. If you have a policy that you put into effect and it's going to benefit us, it's going to benefit our community, and we see it in effect, it doesn't matter to me if you say whatever comes out of your mouth that's not necessarily oratorially or politically correct. If your policy is affecting us in a way that benefits us, great, got my vote. Period, case closed.
See, I guess I go back to, I'm not subscribed to having to choose. I mean, I know we're supposed to, and I do vote for the record, but I'm just not under this thought process that, okay, if I don't vote for A, I have to vote for B. Because like I said, when I started,
I'm not either.
A and B are both bad choices for our community. Now, what you said based on policy, it could advance maybe one or two people in your community, but does that person affect our entire bubble? And that's where I would say, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know because you talk about the trickle down, right? That situation doesn't necessarily affect everybody on the. It's one of those things where it's so high, you have to touch. You can't just be here. You have to touch the daily, and that's why they have a CEO and a COO. The CEO might be up here, but the COO is doing daily operations, dealing with daily things that happen. And so that's why I say it's more so to us that we can't just say, okay, I'm gonna go over here because, hey, this is the other option. That person is not necessarily the COO for the community. And so things will still get, they'll sweep through the cracks. And so we'll still be things that are missed until we have an actual candidate that we say, hey, this person has our best interests. We'll always be going left and right and up and down.
So let's bring it back to, how do you feel about the concept of personal responsibility within the family, like Joel was saying, within the community? Because waiting for the perfect candidate to come and fix it the way it should be won't happen.
This is what I was just about to say. I was going to come back to the idea of personal responsibility. So this is where, in my opinion, I just want the government, what I want them to do is just get out of the way. I want them to kind of get out of the way, allow me the opportunity to open a business, to invest, to create a free market, right? That doesn't have all the conditions, that's going to allow me to have an idea and to maybe go get a loan and implement that idea without putting all kinds of obstacles in my way. For instance, in Los Angeles, if you try and open up a business, all the taxes and the red tape that you have to go through just to sustain your business, it's ridiculous. My mother used to own a staffing service, right? She used to, interview people and then send them to Fortune 500 all over Los Angeles, right? So I worked in the early 2000s. I worked for her for about 2 years. One day I'm in her office working as an employee. Somebody from the city comes in and they want to take inventory of everything that we have in the office that we use for work. That means every pencil, all the paper, every desk, every chair, everything that we use for work. They wanted to add it all up so they could see what it's worth so that they could determine how much we should be taxed. In my opinion, this is doing nothing but getting in the way of small businesses who are the driver of the economy. So I want the politician that's going to create the atmosphere where the government can just kind of get out of the way, create a free market, even though I know that we don't really have one, and let me do my thing. That's what I would like the government to do.
Right.
I'm not opposed to that at all, as a matter of fact. But again, and I've talked to Daniella's point, waiting for the perfect candidate. I don't think it's about that. It's about when the candidates are presented and you say, oh man, I have to take these two. Ugh. Yes, absolutely. Personal accountability is a huge deal. We definitely need to be doing more of that in our own, lives and situations and things like that. I don't negate that at all. I think to what Joe was saying about less regulation. I'm a business owner, so of course I don't want, I don't want people the government taking taxes out that I feel I worked for, of course. But I also don't think that we should just eradicate every single program that's out there for less fortunate without a game plan in mind. Just saying let's just knock everybody off and figure it out. I think that there should be some sort of strategy or some sort of execution to get people that are on some sort of assistance into better situations, whether it's training or education or job placement or something that says, okay, here we go. We're gonna do this. Do. I don't necessarily agree to the 60 months.
I agree that there should be a safety net for people, right? I'm not saying eradicate those programs, but I do believe that if we created an atmosphere where you could open a business, where Taji could open a business, where we could operate and we can employ people, then we would have more jobs for some of those people especially in our community that are unemployed, right?
So
we would have less of that.
I want to step in for that. So yes, I agree 100% what you're saying. So why is it harder, or even if you look at COVID, why did more Black businesses not get money, over the course of the pandemic time? Like, those are situations that I want to think about when you go when you're trying to get these loans. Like you said, everybody else should.
I agree 100%.
We are all in agreement there. And yes. I'll tell you, and we don't have time, but I can tell you why those businesses did not get the loans and the money that they didn't get, because of the person that runs California. This is where I go back to saying that the politicians, that the people that you elect, it's really key to pay attention to the policies that they are going to implement, because it affects everybody, particularly if you're a business owner. So I look at, for example, a friend of mine had a business, and you had those loans. Well, guess who got 2 of those loans? The person running our state, while everybody else wasn't able to access those loans. All that to say is that this is why, again, who you vote for and the policies that they lay out is very key to how it's going to affect you and how you run your life, especially if you are a business owner, is where I was coming from.
I definitely agree. I just don't believe either of those parties are the ones that will lead us to this quote unquote promised land of being able to go in the bank and get a loan, or be able to not have to worry about your baby dying when you go to the hospital because you're being treated like, oh, you're okay, it's all good, take these pills and leave. Like, all these.
No, you're right. You're right.
All situations that we definitely have that's going on in our society that plague us as a community. So the bootstraps always gets me, because it's like, you can go in the hospital and not have to worry about, the doctor saying, oh, you're not sick, go ahead and go home, when you're trying to have a child. Like it's just different playing fields.
Right, but understand that goes back to how hospitals are ran and how hospitals are operated, because you have some hospitals that are funded in a certain manner, especially in certain communities. And you also have insurance. Now, right now, we've got government insurance. anytime the government is in control of anything that you have, yep, there's going to be regulations. There's going to be limitations. So you, for example, you're pregnant and you're going in and they're saying, oh, you're fine. And trust me, I've experienced this. It's because of cost. They're under certain regulations where they're not supposed to pay for certain things. And this is the thing that they don't teach you. They don't teach you how hospitals, or even hospitals and doctors, are regulated. And you're right. We have to start taking care of our own and taking care of ourselves, because you can't depend on these hospitals or these institutions that are controlled or ran by government or ran by certain policies or regulations, especially the ones that affect us in our communities, because we all know we get the bottom of the crumbs in our neighborhoods. And instead of giving us, for example, holistic choices for healing, because that's how our bodies, I don't want to go into this whole tangent, but anyways, hopefully you get what I'm saying.
Yes.
I can go on a whole nother tangent on something else, but just to piggyback on what you were saying, Ivan, it always goes back to who is in control of that, what laws, what policies, what regulations are implemented that hold us back or limit us.
I would think the policies are, and I guess that's what we'll both agree to disagree, because I would think that the policies on both sides are not necessarily in our favor for us to be able to advance in that type of situation. I'm
not sure what you mean by both sides.
I go back to what Joel said, and just everybody should be able to go in and say, I want to start a business, and go in and get a loan and go ahead and be successful. But why is that not the case? Why are people?
Can I challenge that a little bit, Ivan? Why does it always have to I hate when people use the word always and never. Why does it seem like when a Black person is denied a loan that it must be a racist reason? Could it be a low credit score? Could it be inconsistent employment? Could it be another factor that from a business perspective, it doesn't behoove the bank to invest in them?
So that mentality would say that all these Black people are not on their business, and I don't subscribe to that. I
don't think that's what she's saying, because I was going to say, what I was going to jump in and say is, for example, when I got my car, they had to run my credit. Anytime you take out a loan, they have to run your credit. So based on my credit, based on my income, determined the amount of loan that I was going to get. It didn't have anything to do with my skin color. It had to do with the fact, okay, this is what you make. This is what your score is right now. And again, that's how the system is created in terms of getting a loan. So I could only get the amount of car based on what I was able to afford.
I would challenge that based on how I got my car. I was actually working with someone that was building my credit. So if I don't have that connection, I do just walk into this place and get a shake of a hand and say, let's go on your way. But because I was working with a friend who knew who she had to know, and I had the buddy system, I bypassed all of that. I didn't get the same deal I would have got had I just walked in there cold. So what I'm saying to that is, if you want to play a numbers game, there's a majority that is in some position of influence. And so they have specific situations where they can say, hey, I know who you are. Come on in here, get like Joel said, get this loan or get a car loan or get these things. So if you're getting this,
I personally have never gotten a loan because I knew someone. It was always based on my credit and my work history.
That's awesome.
And I'm sure that's happened. I mean, everyone can have someone who knows them, who can, wiggle through the red tape to get them from A to B. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's an advantage.
If there's a majority of people that have more, like we talk about numbers all the time. So if you have 10 people, one person's going to do it. If you have 100 people, 10 people are going to do it, right? That's the law of average. That's how that works. So in a majority, we live in a majority of a certain, racial situation, whatever. And so there are more people that know more people that can say, come on in here and shake some hands. And so that's what I'm saying is like, it really does come down to a numbers game. If I don't care about what's going on in Ivan's community because I don't live in Ivan's community, then that's what it is. Now, I could be green. It doesn't matter. It's like, it's not enough people for the majority to care about what's going on. But there are a lot of people that do favors for others that look like them. So when you look at the positions of influence, right, who's doing favors for who? And listen, that could be anything across the board. People that wear headbands. If I'm working at this place and I see you come in with a headband, guess what? Hey, I'm in a buddy system and shake your hand and give you that 0.3% as opposed to the 17% that you deserve. I guess that's what I'm saying, is that there definitely is a numbers game when it comes to this. Like we're talking about the Black community. We're fighting against numbers. We're fighting against, majority of people that are not 13%. If you look at it, if we're 13%, that means there's a big lump sum of people that don't care about that 13 because they're not a part of that. And that's
what's happening is though, because it sounds, I mean, if we're just gonna just keep it real, the narrative is being put out that, Black people can't get loans because they're Black, because of the color of their skin.
Okay.
But what's happening now is that you have people giving out loans to people of certain incomes that cannot afford those loans. So now you have more of us that are defaulting. This is what I mean, how it backfires and it destroys us within. In the name of being woke, you're giving out loans to people who can't afford these particular loans. Like, I'm not kidding. I went and was supposed to get my hair braided, hood style at somebody's house. This woman was on Section 8 and had an Escalade in her driveway. How is that possible? I don't even drive an Escalade, and I'm not on Section 8. I work. I save my money, but you're on Section 8 and you got an Escalade in your driveway. This is what I'm talking about in terms of trying to appease us, but at the same time financially corrupting and destroying us is what I don't negate that.
I don't negate that at all. And you're right. That's what I was talking about with the 70-year plan on welfare. Yeah, I don't agree with that. But what I will say to you, when you say, how is that person on welfare with, the Escalade? I will say this system is set up to people of all types of walks of life manipulate the system. It's the same way the white collar workers get away with the things that they get away with. And so to me, I look at it like this scale, and I'm not making excuses. I'm not saying one's right, one's wrong. I'm saying in that same extremity that you explained, there's an extremity on this side. There's somebody that's in middle class that's manipulating the system, and they only paid $2 in taxes because they only made $5, and they really made millions of dollars, but they didn't report it because it was cash. Like, let's really go there. But what I'm saying to all these situations is, yes, there are, what you say, loopholes or exceptions or extremities that happen, and we should check all of those. The Enron situation, that should be checked. The Escalade, that should be checked. But what we have is people that want to stay in their positions, and so they're like, I don't care what's going on. Keep Enron doing this thing. Keep the Escalade doing this thing as long as I got my power. And that's where I'm saying, like, okay, how do we shift that?
So we don't have a race problem. We have a character problem on all fronts. We got people who are corrupt regardless of what your skin color is. It's people who are elevated into certain positions of the system regardless of skin color. Because we could be here all night from some of the experiences that I've had and I've seen. These aren't white people. That's all I'm gonna say. But we have an issue of character and people who get promoted into certain positions that are corrupting the system, that are not beneficial to us at the end of the day, if we're talking about our community specifically. So I don't think it has zero to do with race. It has to do with people of a certain level of character that don't have our best interests at heart.
So then I would go back to that, because it goes back to majority, right? And we're talking about numbers. If you don't have a lot of people that look like you or think like you or act like you in these positions of influence.
But these are people who do look like me.
No. I'm saying I'm not listen, I'm not negating what you're saying. Yes, there's some black people that get in these positions and they're shady. There's some white people that get in these positions and they're shady. Asians, shady. Mexican, shady.
Yeah, all of it.
I'm not negating that. Remember, when I first started this, I said we have problems throughout. But that doesn't negate the situation that we have problems with the black community. We do. You can't just say it's not a race problem at all, because there are situations.
Oh no, I'm not saying my issue, my number one issue is that we don't deal with, when it comes to us, when it comes to what is happening with, because like you were saying, we have a unity problem within our community. The problem is we don't own up to it, and we want somebody else to fix it when we have to come together collectively to fix it. I was just having this dialogue with another woman on social media, and the whole time it was white people, white people, white people. But I'm like, we live right in the center of the community where we're doing it to each other, but you keep blaming white people when it's us. That's the problem I have, is that we don't take the accountability and look at us within our own communities. And I think that's the number one issue that we have to deal with as a people. And like you were saying, I think we all agreed that it's us, it's within us, and we have to take the time to sit down. Regardless of what your party is, we got to fix it, because we can't rely on it. We can't wait on somebody else to fix it. And that's what we do. We're like, okay, well, who can we vote for that's going to fix it? And I think we all agree, nobody's fixed it.
If you read the autobiography of Malcolm X, there's a part in the book, I forget what chapter it's in, where he would go around and he would speak at college campuses. And there was this white female that was very enthusiastic about being a part of the solution and doing her part to help the black community. So she came up to Malcolm X and she said to him, "What can I do to help your cause?" And he looked at her and he said, "Nothing."
Right.
He said nothing, because his belief was that the only people that could help the black community were black people. Like, we had to do something, right? And he was very critical of Martin Luther King, because Martin Luther King was, rubbing elbows or bumping elbows with those white politicians. And because of that, he referred to Martin Luther King as an Uncle Tom. So there is something for self-responsibility, but I also want to validate something that I've been said, okay? And I don't want to offend anybody by saying this, especially not you, Daniella, right? But I've been hanging around lots of Jewish people lately. And I'm seeing something that I'm seeing really for the first time up close and personal, and that is how connected your community is. Because it is so connected. I just had a meeting with somebody yesterday, who was a Jewish person, introduced me to another Jewish person. And as I'm walking into this meeting, there goes the owner of K Jewelers is walking out of this meeting as I'm about to go have a meeting with this woman about having a casting spot. And she's telling me about what she does. And she's talking about commerce and how all she does is she connects people with different people. I said, "How do you make your money?" She goes, "I just connect people with money with people with money." And there is a value to having that in your community, because we don't have that in ours, right? Where, we may have it, but it's on a different level.
Yeah,
it's to the point where I'm thinking I need $10,000 to get this project off the ground. And I just have a conversation with somebody and she says, "Oh, you need $10,000? Oh, I can get that. Oh, I know someone else who can chip in another $10,000.
And
this is coming from the Jewish community.
And here's the thing, we have it. And the problem with us is, and trust me, I have experienced this as long as I've been living. It's, "Oh, well, I got mine. Good luck getting yours." And it's like, I always say to myself, why are we like, because we have the capacity, we have the resources, we have our people who have the money. We could be those same type of people. And I'm sure there's people out there that are like that. You just have to go on a treasure hunt to find those people that connect people to people.
Well, there's generational
Why do you have
wealth.
to go on a treasure hunt?
There's generational wealth that does not exist in our community the way that it does in other communities.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Well,
yeah, but then you said you have to go on a treasure hunt though. So that means you literally have to go and like do research and get books and all these different things. He's saying he went into one meeting and saw somebody and went and they were someone else in that same meeting. That's how close it was in the connection.
Yeah.
If you don't have that, and I'm not saying this towards Jewish people, I'm saying this the connection and the numbers and the way that it comes together. If you don't have that, you're already at a disadvantage as far as like what Joel's trying to say of just, oh, you need 10 G's? Bam. Now I gotta go on a treasure hunt. So I'm already like typing and you're already on your second project because you finished. And like I said, I don't want people to think that I'm coming at you. I'm saying any connection. If you've got people that have connections with money and you can go and say, I need $10,000, it's easier for you to be able to make those moves than if you have to, like do every single thing.
Right, but what I'm just saying specifically was when Joe was talking about in terms of demographics, in terms of ethnicity within the Jewish community. What I was saying was within the Black community. When I was saying treasure hunt, it's a treasure hunt within our culture, whereas he was saying it's easy breezy like that within the Jewish community. I'm saying
I really want to emphasize that, because I think sometimes, especially when we see different stereotypes that can be blown up into ways that actually are negative, it is a cultural emphasis. It's not necessarily a religious thing. There's a from the religion comes certain cultural aspects where education is a huge forefront of the Jewish family experience. The Jewish family in itself is a huge part of that experience. So I don't think it's a race or religious issue. I think, and to Joel's example, he's not Jewish and he was given a generous check. It wasn't, just religion to religion, ethnicity to ethnicity. It's, and there was a reason why it was given to him, because probably something in his character and his integrity. I just feel like so many times we get lost in identifying it as a Black issue, a Jewish issue, an Asian issue, when it's really a character and cultural issue that needs to be more honed in on.
Okay, so I want to step on that when you said about the education is important. We're not even taught our whole true education in our system.
That's a huge problem.
So like let's really go there. Like we're not even taught about Lewis Latimer or any
Thomas Sowell.
Yeah, we're and then to Joel's point, we are taught that Uncle Tom was bad. Uncle Tom was trying to help the Black people. But the
side note, if you haven't seen Uncle Tom, you gotta watch the documentary Uncle Tom.
Yeah, Uncle Tom by Larry
Elder. If you
Elder.
haven't seen it, you have to see it. If you haven't seen the documentary.
You said what?
There's a documentary called Uncle Tom. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend watching.
Oh no, of course. I'm just saying, like again, that goes to things that are embedded. If you teach a people the wrong history and everyone hears that history, they will bring that and embed that and indoctrinate that into their own history. So now they're walking around like, oh, this guy isn't anybody, because they've been taught over years that he isn't anybody or she isn't anybody based on omission. I'm omitting true history.
Critical race theory is horrible.
And so I'm going to tell you that only Thomas Jefferson was there. That's it. You don't learn anything else. You don't learn that he couldn't hold the filament for longer than 15 hours. You just learn that, hey man, this guy made the light bulb. He's amazing. Okay, awesome. And so right there, we have a fundamental problem. We're not even learning the true education. So when Daniella says, hey, we started off with education, I'm like,
yeah,
why is that?
We have the worst education systems in our community. I mean, I agree.
You can't blame other people for that. What's the reason? What's the reason that there's such an illiteracy in the Black community Why?
Before you even go there, I talked to a person, and the reason I can say this is because as a photographer, I talk to so many different people, right? So I had an after party, after the events, we have after parties. I was talking to a young woman, and she said, we were talking about education. She said she grew up in Greenwich, Connecticut. Their education, what they learned, was completely different from, I think, what it was, Minnesota. It was a history lesson. It was something simple. And they didn't teach that in Greenwich, Connecticut. They only taught it in Minnesota. And so immediately I was like, oh, wow. If the educational system is this far disadvantaged from, and it's not about black or white, anything specifically for this context, it's the fact that she did not learn about certain things, and this person in Minnesota did, that are fundamental to our history. That automatically puts you at a disadvantage in life because you are looking at life from a less informed focal point.
And that goes back to who is implementing the policies in those communities. It goes back to who is controlling those educational systems in those communities.
But wait, before you go there, I just want to clarify. Just one second, Ivan, just 1 second. I just wanted to clarify when I said about education, I'm not talking about what's actually taught in school, because I think we can all agree that public education is certainly lacking everywhere. What I was saying is the hands-on education where the parents are involved, the parents sit with the children, they emphasize the education as a priority in the home, because you don't have control over what is being taught in school. And there is huge disparities and disadvantages on the communities you're in. Even if you're in a good community, the public education is not necessarily great.
And I grew up with a mother who was a teacher for 35 years for LAUSD. So I grew up with it. So I can tell you some stories. We don't have that kind of time though, when it comes to our educational system here in LA compared to other communities across the country.
Yeah.
And scene.
And scene. No, I just think, we all obviously have different perspectives and similar perspectives as well. I think it comes down to this. We all have the right to believe and think what we want and choose to believe, or however we come to that based on our perspective.
Absolutely.
But I also think you can only go as far as your perspective can only go as far as the information that you have. So if you don't have all of the information, then you are already making false or fallacious or wrong statements.
Yeah, and assumptions.
Based on whatever. It could be anything. I only know what I saw on 3rd Street. So I start speaking freely about how 3rd Street, how it is on 3rd Street. I live on 67. And so I say, oh, those people over there on 3rd need to do this. But I've never stepped foot on 3rd. I've never been over there. I don't know anything outside of what either, like you said, the media or social media or whatever the case may be, outside of my personal experience has shown me, or at least I've been able to experience with those people on 3rd Street. And so what we have is a bunch of people making decisions in influential places that affect everybody, even if they have never stepped foot on 3rd Street. Now, the interesting thing about 3rd Street, it could be good. It could be a good neighborhood, but they may like pineapples on Tuesday. I don't know. But I don't know that because I don't get pineapples on Tuesday. And so when I go to make policy and I say, I'm not making people eat pineapples on Tuesday, they may say, yo, that's what I actually want. But they don't have the numbers, the majority, or anything with them to be able to say, man, we should be eating pineapples on Tuesday. So they're getting overlooked, and they're not being able to get what the things that they feel that they should have as an American in their society. Now, you could take race out of it. You could take money or economics out of it. It's based on the numbers being able to say, oh, we're not eating pineapples on Tuesday. So whatever you say, it's not.
But that's just it. I don't think it should.
Vote for me.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it should be numbers because, like you said, people have different kinds of experiences. They're raised differently. To just make it about numbers, we're taking away individual accountability and responsibility. Can I ask all of you, have any of you had a direct experience with oppression in America?
Nope.
Have I been hung from a tree or called an N-word? Like, I think a lot of people want to.
No, I mean, not those, and with anything. I mean, with job opportunities, has there been a direct experience where you felt oppressed because of the color of your skin?
Here's the thing. This is the thing. Each experience is going to be different. Each person's experience is going to be different. Because I go through 5 things and Joel never goes through any of those things. Immediately we're at a discourse because he can't speak on my experience and vice versa.
So immediately I would say, when people try to say, oh, there's no oppression or there's
I
no.
didn't say that, I was asking.
No. I know you didn't say it. I'm saying when people try to say it, or when they try to discredit the value that I have either experienced or talked about or spoken with different people, because they haven't experienced it.
It doesn't mean it's not happening. I understand.
Well, I just want to
be so dismissive in our country is where the problem is, because we have all these situations, whether it's race, whether it's sex, whether it's sexual orientation, whatever the case may be, where if you're not part of that team, I'll just call it that. If you're not, a Yankee, or if you're not a Red Sox, then all the other people in the league you don't care about until you have to face them. And then when you face them, you see their team makeup and what's going on. And so now you can start seeing like, oh, they're different. They have beards. Oh,
but
shit,
you know what?
beards.
But you know what something you just said, Ivan, I think is what the point Joel was making. And I think what we were all collectively saying is that we live in a culture right now that is trying to tell you that we are all in that same category. But like you just said, your experience is different from Joel's experience or my experience. But the precedent that's being set, or the narrative is being set, particularly with Black people, is that we're all in the same category. Like I can't go on, I had this exchange on a blog, or not a blog, a Facebook post, where somebody tried to say that we're all disproportionately disadvantaged, etc., and we have no opportunities. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I was born in a free country and I've created opportunities for myself with all of the resources that are accessible to me. So I'm not sure what you're talking about and how you're lumping us all into this same category. So what you're saying is valid. I think what we're all saying is that outside of what we're talking about, there is a giant narrative that is basically painting all of us as victims, that we don't have the opportunities, that we're all disparaged in some form or fashion. But I go back to you. You started your own business. You got multiple talents going on, and you were able to do that on your own. You weren't disadvantaged. You have your own business. And what I'm saying is that we have to, this is why I like conversations like this, is that we have to break the narrative that is saying that we're all victims, is basically my point at the end of the day.
Okay, I want to go back to what you were saying, Daniella, the question that you were asking, right? So, have I ever experienced oppression, right? So, in my life, my main example was my father. And when I observe my father, what I observe is success, right? My father was, he was in the military in the 1960s, learned computer programming, got into computer programming when it was at its infancy. By the time I was like in kindergarten, my dad was working for IBM, working for all these tech companies, allowed us to have a really good life. And despite the fact that my dad grew up at the tail end of Jim Crow in the South, I've told you before that he was one of the first students to desegregate the public school system, and I think it was either 1963 or 1964, had to be escorted into the school by the National Guard because people were there to stop him and other people from coming in, people that didn't like the fact that Black people were desegregating the schools. The school buses would not pick them up. They had to ride taxis to school. My parents went through the whole sitting on the back of the bus, crossing the street when white people were on the sidewalk. My mother tells a story about how she had to wait till the end of the day to give birth, right? My parents grew up with all of that. Clear oppression, racism, right? Despite all of that, my parents grew up in this generation where they didn't talk about all of that stuff. Now, partly because there was some shame in there, right? They didn't want to talk about that, but they also came from a generation where their parents had a certain work ethic, right? They didn't complain about stuff, right? So they were workers. And so my observation in life has been my father. He's been my example. When I look at him, I see success. So, and because he was in the military and we grew up as a military family, I was around all kinds of different people, went to schools that were very diverse. And so that mindset of oppression never entered never entered my mind. Wasn't until I was a young adult that I started going out into the world and I started seeing the way people were reacting to me in certain situations when I would realize, oh, that's okay. That's interesting. Oh, and that just happened again. Then I realized, what's the common denominator? Okay, I'm Black. So I started picking up on the social cues. And I started feeling, I read the autobiography of Malcolm X, and that really woke me up. But I was angry at white people for a period of time. But I guess going back to what you were saying, for me, it was perception. So even if I was experiencing something, I never really subscribed to it. And I never really felt it because it's hard to articulate what I'm saying. But I think that if you are weighed down with an oppression mentality, then you're going to feel it everywhere you go, right? You're going to experience it everywhere you go because it's perception, right?
Yeah.
What do they say? When you change the things that you look at, the things that you look at change. So if you have that mentality, then yeah, you're going to experience oppression every place you go. It's going to be everywhere.
And I would say, just in terms of perception, if we're talking about a certain level of oppression, I guess in my case, it would be colorism. But that didn't come from necessarily my family. It came from, I would say, when I entered entertainment. And I'll just leave it there.
Entertainment based on all types of people that are casting, or
just across the board.
Okay.
There's a long history of, if we're talking about a certain level of oppression, I would say in that world it would be colorism.
Okay. So this is definitely an interesting topic, because to Joel's point, no, we didn't deal with, Jim Crow and things like that, but there are microaggressions that happen. Like, for instance, I was the only Black student in my band, in my college band. I was the only Black drummer. So I definitely dealt with situations that weren't uncomfortable, but because I was in those situations and I wasn't leaving band, I had to just suck it up. And so when I think about situations like that, the words that I was called, the things that I went through, the feelings that I had, that's not me being accepted as just a cool dude. That's literally, I'm different. I'm being ostracized for being, as they would call me, big Black. So they meant it in a good way, they meant it to be cool, but is it really cool? But I'm the only Black drummer in this whole band. So, in the drum line. So these are situations like I've grown up with my entire life of being like we talked about earlier. It's like you wanting the finer things, you wanting to be educated, you wanting all these different things. And so you may go to different schools than the one in the neighborhood that you're in. And so when you're going to these different schools, you're getting this higher education, you're being indoctrinated into a different society or different culture than you're normally used to. And so when you do those things, then it's like, this guy, how'd you get here? You must have done something some affirmative action or something like that to get here. And it's
but
like,
that's what I was gonna ask you. Were you the drummer because you were the best drummer, or were you the drummer because because of affirmative action, we just got to put a black guy in here? Because
no.
If you were the drummer because you were the best at what you do, I don't see.
I think you're missing what I'm saying. I think you're missing. It's not about entry. I never talked about entry. Let's just say it was 10 people that tried out and 10 people made it. I wasn't talking about that. I'm saying once I'm assigned to this largest bass drum, right? Because that's the one that I was assigned to.
Right.
I was in this culture where, as the only black person on this drum line and that went to this school in Central Illinois, there were certain things that I dealt with that I would not categorize as happy or easy going. And so, again, like Joel said, you look at the common denominator of the treatment, and it's like, wait, what is going on? Now, did I use that as a crutch and say, oh, woe is me? No, I continued to play the drums and we went to New York and we had a great time. But what I'm saying is the microaggressions that I faced definitely would be like, oh, this isn't necessarily something that any human being should go through.
Well, I think that's where I wasn't.
We're all supposed to be a unified front.
Right, and that's where I wasn't clear, because I keep hearing that term microaggression, and when you said that, I wasn't clear on where you were emphasizing or what exactly the microaggression was, because I hear that a lot, and I'm like, so what's the microaggression?
Okay, so here's one. So we're in Central Illinois. Now you're already going to make judgments about what that is. Maybe you know, maybe you don't.
That's why I'm asking, is I keep hearing it and I'm like, what exactly is that?
No. I want you, no, forget that. I want you to think about Central Illinois. Whatever you come to, that's great. I'm not going to give you anything I want you to come to your own conclusion. Okay, so now I'm in Central Illinois. I'm in this band. It's just one person. Immediately, I represent the entire race. Every question that's asked, I am answering on behalf of every Black American in the entire world. It's certain things that you just don't feel comfortable because there's a majority of people that don't necessarily come from where you come from or grow, they didn't grow up, I mean, let's just talk about culture. We can remove race for 10 seconds. Everybody's from Chicago, I'm from Joliet. So immediately I'm getting ostracized in some sort of way. Now let's add everybody's white from Chicago and I'm Black from Joliet. So now we have stereotypes being thrown. Oh man, you're from the prison town? Oh man, you've been to jail? Like that's a microaggression right there. That's something that had I not been Black from Joliet, they would not come to that conclusion. Remember I talked about the conclusions. How do you come to these conclusions? These things happen because it's embedded or it's implicit or it's an initial. It could be an initial like, and then you think back like, oh, that's not it. You know what I mean? So that was one way. That was one way. And so, no, I wasn't hung from a tree. I wasn't caught.
Can I ask you something? Just speaking to Joel's earlier point. One person can say that's microaggression. Another person can say, oh, that person is ignorant or limited and just go about their day and not think twice about it.
So the whole
when you label something,
drum line was that?
What's that?
The entire drum line was that?
Well, I mean, I guess I could relate it to, I think if you're in any minority, most people are the majority and you're not. Like, I mean, when I went to college, I was the only Jew amongst my 10 roommates. And my roommate, who I'm still very close to this day, told me that I was the first Jewish person she ever met. And she asked me about horns. Okay. I mean, what? Some people believe that. And again, I was incredulous that was even a real question. But I was more interested in her wanting to learn and be curious. And I went to mass with her, and she went to Jewish services with me, and she's a good friend of mine. I didn't look at it as what I guess you would call a microaggression. She was ignorant, but she was curious, and it actually brought us closer.
So let me ask you this. So is this considered a micro? So for example, I went to an HBCU, right? But every time I told people I was from California, I'm not even kidding. Everybody assumed I was from Compton. Like straight up, everybody assumed, and I went to an HBCU.
Yeah.
Anytime I say, "Oh, where are you from?" "I'm from California." "Oh, you must be from Compton."
Yes.
Because that was the assumption that that's where all Black people lived. And I'm like, no, I'm not from. Why does everybody think I'm from? Yeah. I'm from Compton. That like this is the only place that Black people dwell is Compton. So I guess what I'm asking is that what is called the microaggression? Because from what you're saying sounds very similar to some experience that I've had in school, and I went to an HBCU. So and that always drove me nuts, because there was the assumption that, oh, this is where all Black people dwell in California is the hood. And I'm like, no.
Now who would ask that? Because was it only Black people that said that?
I went to an HBCU.
No, I know, but there are all kinds of different people that go to HBCUs.
Oh, when I went, this was Black people. We had there was two white people that I knew that went to the college that I attended, but it was 90% Black people. And every single time I said, I'm from California, the assumption was, oh, where are you from? Compton? Now I'll admit, I wasn't as articulate as I am now. I was a little more hood, but being that I'm a voiceover talent now, I have to, alter how I speak. But if you knew me back then, I was, speaking in the same colloquialisms as Cube and, all the people that came from Inglewood. But that was the assumption. And I was offended by that, because I thought, why would you assume that? And I look back and I go, interesting. So I'm listening to what you're saying, and I'm thinking, okay, well, was that considered a microaggression? Because I was royally offended by that.
Well, look at the one that I used. I went to school, and I went to school in Central Illinois, and then people found out I was from Joliet. They immediately assumed I'd either been to the prison, went to the prison, or know somebody in prison. Like it's automatically a negative thing. There's so many other things at Joliet, but the mindset gravitates towards that. And
to me, that sounds like a stereotype.
Yeah,
it sounds like a stereotype.
Right.
Okay, so are we talking tomato? Like
I'm just saying your experience sounds very similar to mine, where everybody thought this brown girl who had a little bit of hood in her tank was from Compton. I could be from Beverly Hills. Yeah. I could be from Beverly Hills. It was, no, she must be from Compton.
So for me, I would say the microaggression, it doesn't just stick to race. We haven't talked about sexism really too much, but when I'm studying these different things, I've realized that a lot of the things that women say they go through are similar things that other marginalized groups go through. And so it's interesting to me, because when I talk to certain women, they will go hard on gender, but they will deny race as a problem to the T. And it's interesting, because if all of these are based on, let's just say a majority or some sort of influential power or some sort of influential stake, then I couldn't be the person that I am without saying, oh, okay, wait a minute, hold on. Okay, what types of things were easier for me as a man that maybe women have had to go through. And so that's what makes me realize these things aren't just made up. When people start talking about their experiences, these things there's some merit or some base on it. Now, again, to your point, Taji, some situations are way extreme. Hey, you're just making that up as far as like
it's the crying wolf situation, yes. But to just be like all or none, to me, I just can't subscribe to that, because I've actually experienced so many things. And then I've also
I don't think anybody's saying that, though.
I don't think anyone said.
I don't think anyone's saying all or none. I don't think anybody said that.
It's a matter of perception of
I
the
don't think anybody's
no one
saying
said that on this show, or no one's saying that at all.
I was going to go back to that again. So it comes back to perception, because I mean, listen, I've experienced racism too. When I first started, I mean, I could go down a list of things that I've experienced that no doubt had to do with race. When I first started driving a vehicle, I started noticing that the first 2 times I ever got pulled over, I was pulled over and I was asked to get out of the car and sit on the curb, right? I was, 18 years old, had no idea that was wrong. I was with a girl, pulled me over for a stop sign, and tinted windows, I guess, and they made me sit on the curb. The next time I got pulled over, made me sit on the curb. Wasn't until I was with another Black friend and a Mexican friend, and we were sharing experiences, and they were saying how they had also been pulled over and asked to sit on the curb. A white friend of ours who just happened to be there, his name was Dan Guay. And we, all the 3 of us, two Black kids and a Mexican kid, we asked this white kid, blonde hair, blue eyes, have you ever experienced the same thing? We're looking at him like he's going to say, oh yeah, I've been pulled over and I've been asked to sit on the curb too. And he said no. And the 3 of us kind of looked at each other, being young and naive as we were, and we're scratching our heads. We're like, that's not right. But that was one of the first times it dawned on me that, wow, I was racially profiled. I mean, it sounds ridiculous now for me to even act like I didn't know what that was. I was racially
profiled, believe it or not.
I thought that was okay, but, and that was my ignorance then. I didn't know that was happening. But
I think for me,
perception has a lot to do with everything. I mean, it really does. Maybe I didn't make the point that I was trying to make, but perception has a lot to do with everything. And what your experience in Central Illinois sounds a lot like what Taji experienced being at an HBCU. And sometimes people are genuinely curious, and other times they're just being ignorant and even applying racial stereotypes and being ignorant about your situation. But honestly, in those situations, I like engaging with those people because I just like having conversations.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll tell you this, believe it or not, speaking of perception, I too was racially profiled because I was coming from the gym. I had on a hoodie and all you saw was this. And I'm driving near a high school. And sure enough, I hear, woo, police car rolls up on me. And I'm sitting there going, why am I being pulled over? And this car pulls up behind me, gets out, assumed that I was a man because I had the hoodie on. All you saw was this. And I'm looking at him, and as soon as he was coming up to the car, I took my hoodie off and I unzipped my hoodie because I'm thinking, why did he pull me over? And the way that he came up, he was like, hi, sir. And then he went, ma'am. And then that clicked and I went, okay, now I know what Black men go through when they get pulled over. I'm like, and I had to correct him in a way, but it was in a comedic way because that's kind of how I deal with situations like that, because he knew he was wrong. But it was just interesting, speaking of perception, how this officer thought that I was up to no good because he saw a hoodie and this. So I get it, but go ahead, Ivan. What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say I don't want anybody to think that I just harp on, Black this, Black that, as far as these situations. What my issue is that, at least specifically over the course of the last year, if I woke up and had eggs for breakfast, there were people that would say, no, you didn't have eggs. and I'm looking at the plate and I'm like, what are you talking about? Right. And so that's
You're black, you can't have eggs.
Something to that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Something to that nature. And so to me, that's where I come in and I'm like, yo, but I'm not trying to sit here and say it happens all the time. Every situation is bad. All the cops are coming at. That's not what I'm saying. I'm literally just focused on the people that have never had too many engagements with minorities, or like I said, I try to keep women in there as well, and just people that are they have a one-track mind about things or people that they have limited experience with. And so for me, that's where I kind of try. I'm more like.
Wouldn't you say that's an assumption also, to assume that? I mean, would you assume that I have limited experience?
No, what I would say is that there are situations that happen that I have to be aware of that aren't part of my makeup. So no, you may have not gone through any gender situation. You may have had the most perfect stellar life. But what I'm saying,
of course I haven't. No one has.
I don't want to just think that it's only what I'm going through. So I try to look at situations outside of just what I have gone through as far as my experiences. And so and that helps me to not be one-track minded and always think like, oh yeah, it's this. Because I know that it may not be that. So I'm coming from a point of just interjection and saying, hey, wait, hold on. You can't say never, because I literally just had the eggs. I can't say I never had eggs. I just had the eggs. Yeah. So that's kind of.
I agree. I agree. I've had people. You have to educate people. I mean, just real quick example. Being a BO talent, there's an assumption that I can't do accents. That I don't have the capability. I literally had an agent tell me. I told him that I do mostly UK accents. Because I studied it. He looked at me and he was like, that I seriously doubt. Like, to my face, right? So I literally had to like break down and speak to him in the UK accent and literally educate him in the accent to shut it down, just to educate him that no, your perception of me is wrong. And I always look at those situations is not a situation to get angry about. But I love the opportunity to check people and school people and say, really? Let me show. Like, I had someone tell me that I could never play a wife. I said, really? Well, let me show you my reel. There's about 2 episodes on there where I played someone's wife, before you look at this and have a perception of me. So, I mean, I would agree with you there. It's a teaching moment on all fronts. And I think that's what we just have to start doing. We just have to start educating rather than react. We need to inform and educate.
Yes.
And rather than virtue signal and all that other stuff. I believe in informing and educating people.
And I don't want you to feel like everything that you're saying. I mean, I'm listening and I get and I understand the things that you're saying. And I agree with the things that you're saying also. Like, I know that racism exists. I know the things that you're saying. I understand that all of those are real. So I don't want you to feel like you have to, feel defensive, like if we're not hearing you or I'm not hearing you, because I definitely am. I know with me, I think when I was younger, see, I'm 53 years old, right? And I think
you are?
Age, I'm 53 years old.
Never know that. That's melanin.
Yeah. So age has changed my perception quite a bit. Because when I was younger, I mean, trust me, I didn't have these views that I have now. Being a dad, being a parent, being in relationships, all of these things have changed my perception. Having said that, I know that racism is real. All the things that you're saying, I know that they exist. Those microaggressions, they definitely do exist. For me, I just want to make sure that as a community, we don't get stuck in that, right? And for me, that's the thing that I fear with these politicians
Yep.
is that I feel that they are invested in keeping us stuck.
Victim.
And so sometimes to make sure that we're not stuck, I will overcompensate, right? And I might go too far in going the other way because I don't want to be stuck. You know what I mean? So I acknowledge that because I want to validate the things that you're saying. And I also want to acknowledge that sometimes I might go too far the other way.
I think for me, it's interesting that you said that because and that goes back to the politics, right? So if we all can agree that situations happen, we don't even have to classify it. Situations happen. I think where the issue for me is that you get one side that doesn't acknowledge it or address it at all, like, hey man, just figure it out, and the other side that just panders, and pull strings to act like they care, but they really don't. Would you say, Taji, the virtual signaling? And so that's where it gets interesting for me, because I'm like, well, don't try to sell me and then leave me high and dry. But then, hey, if I'm sitting here saying you want my vote, well, then you have to address policies or whatever it is that I say that I want you to take care of. And
exactly.
So when I personally go to the polls and I see pandering and avoidance, I'll say, then I can't give my vote to either person. And it could be whoever.
I don't disagree. Because let me tell you, I think we've all seen the worst of pandering. And that's what I mean. You can't, this is why I say, I can't be affected by feelings or emotions. I have to hone in on, okay, what's your record? What are you going to do? What you say that you are going to do with regard to policy and merit? Because we all know there's no perfect politician, no perfect president. Everybody's flawed. Everybody's got their corrupt tendencies and what have you. But no, I don't disagree.
Okay, so guys, it's we've been going pretty long.
The
conversation has flown. I want to kind of wrap up a little bit, and Ivan too. I just want to piggyback with what Joel is saying. I just want you to know that I have absolute empathy for what you or your family or your people have gone through, and it's so important that we understand more and we take opportunities. Not to me, when I'm faced with someone who makes an ignorant comment, I look for the opportunity to connect over sharing more information and widening their perspectives. Kind of like what Taji was saying with the English accent. I don't automatically assume they are trying to be negative towards me. Now, granted, I've had also my share of negative anti-Semitism that was blatant anti-Semitism. So I think it's always great to understand each other from a more humanistic perspective and not minimize people's experiences. We all have different experiences. My hope is just to not, for many people of all different races and backgrounds, not to assume aggression, not to assume that there is racism, but looking at for an opportunity to connect and grow and educate, because we are all on the same team. We're all Americans. When our weakest link does better, we all do better. We all need to support each other. So I think that's what we can all agree on. And then just to, emphasize what I heard each of you say, Ivan, you were talking about, hoping that there is a lot more unity within the Black community. Joel, you were saying you would like to see a stronger family unit. And Taji, what I heard you say is that there needs to be more accountability within the community as well. And there's many things that I can relate to as a Jewish minority as well with this overlap. So I want to thank you guys so much again for your time, for your authenticity, for your vulnerability. I hope you got some takeaways and perceptions. You see, we can have this conversation, not always agree, but still have respect and abilities to actively listen to each other. We need more of this. So if anyone's listening, if you too would like to be on the next episode of America's Voices, just reach out. We'd love to have you. And with that said, God bless each and every one of you, and God bless America. Take care.
All right.
All right.
See y'all.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Nice meeting you, Ivan.
Oh,
Yeah, nice to meet you,
Nice to
Ivan.
meet everybody. Thank you so much. This was so much fun.
Yeah, it's a great discussion. And feel free to come back.
Oh,
Yes.
for sure. I definitely want
Absolutely.
to. I would love to.
Absolutely. Bye, everybody.
All right. Good night.
All right.